This film begins by telling about a guy named Lewis, who works for Interpol, and a lady named Eleanor, who's a prosecutor from America. Right now, Lewis is in Germany to meet someone who knows about a big scandal involving a company called IBBC. But when Lewis was about to meet this person, he found them lying on the road, hurt. Upon seeing that, Lewis tried to help, but then he got into an accident himself and passed out. Luckily, Lewis survived the accident, but the person he was supposed to meet died. This made him and Eleanor suspicious. They looked into it and found out the person had been killed with a poison bullet. At that time, Lewis thinks this was done on purpose to stop the scandal from coming out. The company involved, IBBC, was smart. They hired someone to kill anyone who knew too much about what they were up to. After Lewis found out their informant Tommy had been murdered, he quickly called Eleanor in New York. He asked her to come to Germany with him because Tommy was dead. Eleanor wasted no time and caught a flight to Germany to join Lewis. They went straight to the German police and told them what had happened. They even brought evidence showing that Tommy was killed because he knew about the IBBC bank scandal. At that time, the police wanted to know more about the scandal, so Eleanor explained that IBBC was stealing money and doing illegal stuff in other countries, not just in Germany. But instead of helping with Tommy's murder, the police accused Lewis of acting without proof and pointed out his past troubles at Interpol. Feeling betrayed, Lewis decided to leave, not trusting the police anymore. In the morning, Lewis stayed at a hotel to clear his mind and think things through. Meanwhile, there's this guy named Wilhelm who works closely with the leader of IBBC. He met with a hitman and asked him to go after a politician named Umberto. Once everything was arranged, Wilhelm told the hitman to get the job done whenever he could, and then they both left. While Lewis kept digging into the IBBC bank scandal, he saw the news about another person, Andre, who worked for IBBC and died. This got him confused, thinking it was similar to what happened to Tommy. Soon after, he gathered evidence and wanted to bring up the case at Interpol, but his senior said they couldn't handle it and should leave it to local authorities. But there, he didn't give up though. The next day, Lewis had plans to meet someone named Scarson, who was the last person to see Andre alive. But instead of meeting Scarson, IBBC sent Lewis to meet White, one of their legal advisors. There, Lewis wondered why he wasn't meeting Scarson, but White said as an IBBC lawyer, he had the right to know what questions Lewis had. At that time, Lewis didn't want his hard work to go to waste, so he started asking questions, especially about when Scarson last saw Andre. But White answered in a complicated way with another advisor helping to confuse Lewis. Feeling like they were hiding something, Lewis decided to leave the bank. Just as Lewis was leaving, Eleanor called him with news that they found cyanide in Tommy's blood, confirming he was poisoned. As Lewis was walking away, a stranger bumped into him. There, Lewis got suspicious and followed the man, but it turned out he was just a regular person. Soon after, Lewis apologized and went on his way. Meanwhile, Eleanor tried to reach out to Tommy's wife. She asked her if Tommy ever mentioned anything about his meetings with IBBC. But Tommy's wife said no and suggested talking to Umberto instead. On the other hand, Lewis talked to his colleague named Victor about his encounter with Scarson. There, he wanted to talk outside, but Victor insisted on staying indoors. Eventually, Lewis went along and smashed Victor's phone, revealing a bug in it. After they left Victor's house, they talked about IBBC's dealings with Umberto, Italy's biggest arms dealer. However, just before the deal went through, Umberto abruptly pulled out, ending the transaction forcefully. The next day, Eleanor and Lewis decided to meet with Inspector Alberto, who would introduce them to Umberto. It just so happened that Umberto was gearing up to give a speech to the people of Italy, campaigning for himself as the new prime minister. At that time, Eleanor and Lewis informed Umberto's assistant that they wanted to talk to him about IBBC. The assistant asked them to keep it quiet, and they agreed. Finally, they met Umberto. There, Eleanor asked him why he sold weapons to IBBC. Umberto explained that IBBC wanted to control global trade and the economy by using debt. So, his company would sell weapons to IBBC, who would then sell them to other countries like China and Israel. This was why he was hesitant about their deal. After their talk, Umberto invited Lewis and Eleanor to meet him again after his speech. As Umberto was speaking, a sniper tried to shoot him, but missed. Before they could try again, another sniper shot and killed him. The first shooter was caught and killed, but but the main sniper disappeared. Meanwhile, Lewis, Eleanor, and Alberto were across the street having coffee while Umberto was giving his speech. Soon after, they rushed over when they heard gunshots. There, Lewis noticed a suspicious man and tried to catch him, but the man got away and hit Eleanor with a car. Unfortunately, Lewis lost track of him again. On the IBBC side, Scarson was in a meeting with a business partner when his assistant interrupted, saying the IBBC board wanted to see him. Shortly after, Scarson excused himself and joined the board. At that time, they were worried about Umberto's murder and decided they needed to act fast. They planned to make a deal with Umberto's sons, Enzo and Mario. However, Scarson wanted to offer condolences to the family first, to show empathy. The board agreed, and they prepared to move forward with their plan. Meanwhile, back to Lewis. So, at that time, he picked up Eleanor, who was starting to feel better after the attack. They met with Alberto to go to the shooting scene. With Alberto's access, they could investigate the case. Soon after, they approached the crime scene and saw the bullet hole. Eleanor stuffed a piece of paper into it, while Lewis checked where the sniper might have been. Once they figured out the sniper's location, they went after the second sniper, using the evidence they found. Lewis noticed a familiar footprint and took photos of it. They asked Alberto to help identify the footprints. Alberto discovered they were from a shoe with steel covering. But as they were investigating, a police general scolded Alberto in Italian, interrupting them. After the police general left, Alberto explained that the police wanted Lewis and Eleanor to leave Italy right away. Not wanting any trouble, they agreed to head to the airport. At that time, Eleanor also reached out to a prosecutor in America for help. But at the airport, Eleanor noticed something. If the sniper was wearing steel-plated shoes, they would trigger the metal detector. They decided to stay and check the CCTV footage to find the killer. Soon after, they found him on the footage, but he managed to hide his face. Not long after, Alberto identified the killer as Sherwood and flew to New York. Upon knowing that, Lewis and Eleanor decided to follow him to New York. When Lewis and his team arrived in New York, they were helped by 3 detectives who were asked to assist. At that time, they managed to find Sherwood's personal information, but it turned out he was using a fake address. So, they decided to question the shoemaker Sherwood used, Dr. Isaac. At first, Dr. Isaac was scared and didn't want to share any information. But when Lewis threatened that Sherwood might harm him too, Dr. Isaac finally cooperated and showed them the file containing Sherwood's name. After a whole night of work, they finally got Sherwood's personal details. The next day, while they were on their way, Lewis got a message that this was their last chance to find Sherwood. The chief prosecutor warned that Sherwood might disappear after finishing his job. Upon hearing that, Lewis and his team quickly started searching for Sherwood throughout New York. While they were walking, one of Lewis's colleagues saw Sherwood while buying coffee. He immediately informed his friends. Soon after, they decided to follow Sherwood discreetly, rather than confronting him directly. There, Lewis made sure to keep a distance so Sherwood wouldn't notice them. But Sherwood sensed he was being followed. He made a call from a public phone and arranged to meet someone at a museum. Shortly after, Lewis and his team continued to follow Sherwood. After some time, they arrived at a large museum. In the museum, Lewis and his team split up to search for Sherwood. Eventually, they spotted him with an old man, and it was Wilhelm. There, Wilhelm ordered Sherwood to kill someone. This time not a politician but Lewis, who was investigating the IBBC scandal. As Sherwood was leaving, he noticed Lewis hiding behind a wall. Realizing he was the target, Sherwood tried to escape and shot at Lewis and his team. Soon after, they managed to surround and capture him. But there, Sherwood claimed that IBBC wouldn't let Lewis arrest him. Suddenly, a group of armed men appeared and shot at Lewis. Sadly, one of Lewis's men was killed in the shooting. Now, Eleanor had to work with Sherwood to solve the problems. Despite being shot multiple times, Sherwood continued to try to find a way out of the museum. While hiding, Sherwood warned Lewis again that IBBC wouldn't let him be caught. But Lewis didn't back down and focused on finding a way out. He also fought back against the gunmen. After a long shootout, they escaped the museum by dropping a large lamp on the gunmen, crushing them. Despite surviving, Sherwood couldn't make it due to his gunshot wounds. Before he died, Sherwood wanted to tell Lewis something about IBBC, but he didn't get the chance. In the evening, Lewis gathered with his colleagues in a secret place. There, Eleanor took him to interrogate Wilhelm, whom they had captured. At that time, they were ready with evidence, and Lewis just needed to muster the courage to make Wilhelm confess. Then, once Lewis was all set, he went straight in and approached Wilhelm to ask about the IBBC scandals. Even though Wilhelm was old, he stood firm and didn't want to spill the beans. Instead, he compared himself to Lewis, saying they were alike in having good intentions and wanting to expose IBBC's shady deals. But over time, things changed and IBBC tempted him to become dishonest. There, Wilhelm confessed that honest folks like Lewis were hard to come by. Unfortunately, he struggled to make Wilhelm confess, so he left and told Eleanor to escape with him. Then, Lewis sensed IBBC knew they had Wilhelm, so he urged Eleanor to leave to avoid IBBC's hired guns. He assured her he had a plan to deal with this mess. Upon hearing that, Eleanor trusted him and left without questioning. A while later, in Italy, the big shots at IBBC were all set for a meeting. But as they waited for over an hour, the meeting never happened. Suddenly, a bunch of guys in sharp suits and dark shades showed up, asking them to follow. They whisked them away from the scene. Meanwhile, in a distant building, Umberto's two sons, Mario and Enzo, were grateful to someone who exposed IBBC's corruption. Turns out, it was Lewis who tipped them off. There, he wanted to stir up trouble between IBBC and Umberto's sons, who now ran their late father's company. Later on, the IBBC crew started feeling like pawns in Umberto's son's game. They didn't want to lose out, so they decided to call in Sunni, the richest arms dealer in the Middle East, for another deal. Later on, in Turkey, Scarson from the BBC met directly with Sunni to talk business. They discussed what Sunni wanted to buy and the prices IBBC set. At that time, Lewis had been keeping tabs on them. He teamed up with Wilhelm to take down IBBC. But turns out, Wilhelm had hidden a recording device in Scarson's shirt. Meanwhile, Lewis waited to hear their conversation so he could expose the scandal. But Sunni's bodyguards chased him off, so he missed part of it. After they finished, they split up. There, Scarson found Wilhelm asleep, but when he checked, Wilhelm was dead. Then he spotted Lewis and bolted. In that moment, Lewis calmly followed Scarson until he cornered him on a rooftop. Scarson asked what Lewis wanted, and he said justice. Suddenly, shots rang out, hitting Scarson. They were from hitmen hired by Mario and Enzo seeking revenge for their father's death. At that time, IBBC's reign crumbled, and Lewis achieved it all on his own. The film ends. The moral lesson from this film is if you're ever chased by hitmen on a rooftop, make sure you're wearing your running shoes, not your dancing shoes.